Hey guys, it's Sam, and this is my spoiler-free review for A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. This was a book I read a little while ago now, and I was just gonna do a review on my Patreon. If you're not familiar, I do reviews for every single book I read on Patreon, not always putting reviews up here, but this one was such a favorite of the year so far that I felt like I had to do one over here. So this is a YA kind of dark academia fantasy standalone, and this is following our main character of Effie, who is a student at the architecture college. She really wants to be a student at the literary college, but they do not allow women into the literary college in this world because writers are seen as like almost gods, saints, kind of. And so the study of literature is like religious in and of itself, so women are not allowed into the literature college. So she's in the architecture school, which is like the second best, but is one of the only women in the architecture school. And one of her favorite authors just recently passed and wrote an epic about the Fairy King and the woman that destroys him, and she is obsessed with this work. And his son puts out a ad kind of competition for someone to solely redesign his father's estate, so this famous author's estate, and whoever wins can come and do that. So she applies as this architecture student, not only because she's so obsessed with this author, but also because she has had some sexual harassment, sexual assault at her school from her like professor advisor, and she just really wants to get away from all that. So she mysteriously ends up kind of winning this competition and ends up going to this estate and realizes that everything is not what it seems. There's also a rival student from the literary college there trying to disprove that this author of hers, who's beloved, was actually a fraud. And there's a lot of weird things happening in the house that feel like maybe it's attached to the Fairy King and all of that. And she also has this history with the Fairy King. So everything takes off from there. Like any Ava Reid book, this book is fairly heavy, and I mentioned some of those themes in the synopsis, but there are triggers here for sexual assault and harassment and like quid pro quo kind of power dynamics that happen. There's nothing on page, but there are like behaviors and things that are talked about, and it's just like flashback to a lot. And there's also some body horror stuff. So first off, when we talk about the world building with this, this is a world that is sort of feeling like, I don't know, like a fantasy sort of World War I type period is kind of the vibes that you get from this. And you have this very academic setting, and then when you go to the estate, how I describe it is kind of like Crimson Peak with water instead of blood. So all the vibes of Crimson Peak, if you're familiar with that horror movie, which is more like a gothic romance, this similar vibes, and it just is a lot about like water and the imagery of water, and this estate is right near the water, and so the water becomes this enemy, and the writings of this author are very based around water and water imagery. There's people like very afraid of drowning, there's storms that have wiped like entire places off the map, so water is this big all-consuming atmospheric threat. There's also this theme of literature as religion, so the ways in which literature is described and like a part of the culture in this like very major way is really cool as well. Just like the lyricism and the prose of Ava Reid's writing in general is why they're one of my favorite authors. There's also this concept of fairy and like the Fairy King specifically as this malevolent figure who is kind of in the background all the time, is a part of this estate maybe, but we're not sure, and is woven into this epic myth. And there's also this history that Effie has with the Fairy King where she sees hallucinations around the Fairy King. She's not sure if they're hallucinations or if they're real though. She's had this for all of her life. So he is sort of like this demon that she's having to contend with as well. Next, I'm gonna talk about our characters. First, our main character of Effie. I really enjoyed her from the beginning. She is a character who is so enthralled with this like literature and this story and this author, and so we kind of follow her journey as she gets to kind of see that this person was flawed, that it doesn't, and like she has a lot of really cool lines about like, you know, the author not necessarily mattering but also mattering, and like, and she's just having to come to terms with this like thing that was her coping mechanism that got her through a lot, and it being like about more than she ever really knew. And some of that like never meet your heroes kind of concept, because she's having to deal with this and being in this man's estate and meeting his family, like his son, who is very eccentric and also being a little creepy towards her, not really sure what's going on with him. Is there something magical or is there something not? It's always kind of trying this line of like, is there magic going on? Or is there just bad behavior? Is this person just creepy? Like, what is happening? So you have her and her ability to kind of like roll with some creepy things, but also be like constantly questioning what's going on around her. Then Preston, who is the rival literary student that she encounters and gets to know, their unlikely like sort of rivals to friends to allies to more situation is one of my favorites in like literature romance depictions anyway. And this is not like mainly a romance. I would say it's not. It's much more about like Effie's journey and things. But they balance each other out really well and like learn and grow from each other too, because he initially comes as like, I am trying to disprove that this man wrote this book. But he's also having to like come to terms with a lot of things as well as they're discovering this whole like mystery. So last, let me talk about the plot. So the whole like thing is that she is up there to like redesign this estate, but you start figuring out that like, again, not everything is as it seems. Is there magic? Is it just like creepy shit going on? What is happening? And you're sort of unraveling a mystery of like, did this man write this epic? And if he didn't, who did? And he has a lot of secrets and the family doesn't want these secrets to come out. And what are these secrets about? So yeah, overall, like I said, big themes of like people taking advantage of power and taking advantage of women and like all that kind of stuff. So you have that theme throughout, and it's very like unsettling throughout, but not as unsettling as some of Avery's other stuff. So this is definitely toned down because it's YA, but yeah, this unsettlingness, the water creeping in, the storms, the house is not quite as it seems, what is all going on. So that plot kept me engaged the entire time. I flew through this. Like I said, loved the characters, loved the atmosphere. The plot was super interesting from this like mystery, dark academia element. So shocking no one, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I really loved it. I love Avery Reed's imagery. I love their prose. I just, everything that they do with these like darker themes is just so juicy and rich to me, and I will keep reading everything that they write. So comment down below and let me know what you thought of A Study in Drowning. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.